All right, so on to our next unit. And so what we're looking at here to start off is multiplying binomials. So we're going to be dealing with polynomials. In fact, certain polynomials which are called quadratics, which we've already kind of looked at, graphing a quadratic where we have a parabola. All right, now, like I said, we're going to be multiplying binomials. And so just to start off, this is a question that you maybe or maybe not, but you should have done in grade 9. And that is multiplying polynomials. Now, this 2x here that I'm going to multiply the x minus 3 in brackets is what I call a monomial. Mono is a prefix referring to one. There's only one term there, a one-term polynomial. This in here, I have an x and a minus 3. That is a binomial. All right, so in grade 9, you should have been taking a monomial times, well, a polynomial, not necessarily a binomial. It could be a trinomial with 3 terms, which we're going to look at later on today. Now, to do that, to expand, there's a method that, well, it's called the distributive property, but I call it the rainbow rule, in which I'm going to take 2x and multiply it by x. And I'm also going to take 2x and multiply it by the minus 3. So again, I think maybe you can kind of see why I call this the rainbow rule. Now, when I do 2x times an x, this is where our power rule starts to come into play. That's really a 1x. You can look at it the same way. I have an x. I have one of them. And so I multiply the numbers. So 2 times 1 is 2. But then here's where our power rules come into play. X times x. Again, they both have an exponent of 1 on them. Keep the base the same, add the exponents. So my final term there is going to be a 2x squared. I then also have 2x times a minus 3. Well, 2 times minus 3 is negative 6, and, well, I have an x there. And so our final answer is 2x squared minus 6x. And we don't go any further because, again, with polynomials, to put things together, they have to have like terms, which means the variable has to be the same, which is true here, but also the exponent, which is not true here. So that's why I can't put those together. Now, what we're looking at today is taking a binomial times a binomial. So for example, see example 1, A, where I have a x minus 3, there's a binomial, times an x plus 5. Now, a little bit different. I'm not going to use the rainbow rule. Well, I kind of am, but I name it something different when I'm doing a binomial times a binomial. And that process is called FOIL. Now, FOIL is what we call an acronym. It means that every letter in that word actually stands for another word. All right? And so what we're looking at here is that initially the F stands for first, where I am going to multiply my first terms. So I have an x here and an x here. I am going to multiply them first. And so x times x, just like we had here, is going to be x squared. Keep the base the same, add our exponents. Now the O in first represents the word outside. Okay, and so the outside ones, well, this is on the far left, this is on the far right, so I'm going to do x times 5, which is a 5x. All right, so now we got 2 more letters. And so my next word here, I, is going to stand for inside. So the one's on the inside. So then minus 3, you got to watch your sign here, times the x, which would be a minus 3x. And then lastly, I wonder what the L stands for. Lastly, we have L, which does stand for last. All right, so we got some opposites here. First and last, outside and inside. And the last ones are the negative 3 times the positive 5. So negative times the positive gives us a negative. And I get negative 15. All right. Now I look to see whether I collect like terms. And in this case, I can. I have this x squared. I don't have any more x squareds, but I do have these x's I can put together. Again, they are like terms because they have the same variable and the same exponent. So 5x minus 3x I have 2 x's. And then, of course, I just have my number there, minus 15. And so our final answer when we expand these binomial times a binomial using FOIL is x squared plus 2x minus 15. All right, so I'm going to try a few more of those. Is there any questions so far? All right, so we're going to do some expanding here. All right, so the next up we have B, where I have a x minus 4 times an x minus 6. All right, so once again, I am going to use FOIL. So I'll put that over here, just as a reminder. All right, so the first off, the F, the first ones. So there's the first one here, an x and an x. So I multiply those 2 x's, and again, I get x squared. The outside ones, so the x and the minus 6. You always got to watch the sign here. So I multiply them. So if I have an x times a minus 6, I'm going to end up with a minus 6x. Inside ones, there's the 2 guys in the inside, the minus 4. Again, you got to watch your signs. Times an x, and this time I'm going to get minus 4x. And then lastly, the L, our last ones. The negative 4 and the negative 6. So minus 4 times a negative 6, negative times a negative, it's going to give me a positive. And so I get positive 24. Again, I can collect like terms. My x is in the middle there. And so just to finish this off, I have x squared. If I have minus 6x minus 4x, I'm going to lose 10 x's. And then I have my plus 24. And again, I can't go any further than that because they're not like terms. We got 2 here that have the same variable, but again, not the same exponent. All right, let's try another one here. C. We have x plus 5 times 4x minus 7. All right, so once again, I'm going to use FOIL because I have a binomial, 2 terms, times a binomial, 2 terms. And so I look at the first ones. So I have an x times a 4x, or in this case, you could look at it as a 1x times a 4x, doesn't matter. 1 times 4 gives me 4. X times x gives me x squared. All right, then the outside ones. So now I'm going to have, again, x times minus 7. So that is going to be a minus 7x. All right, and then I, the inside ones. And so I have 5 and a 4x, so 5 times 4x. Well, 5 times 4 is 20, and then I have that x there. And then last, 5 times a minus 7, positive times a negative is going to give us a negative, and so we have minus 35. Again, checking out to make sure that, to see if I can collect like terms, which I can. And so I have a minus 7x and a 20x there that I'm going to put together. But I still have this 4x squared there. Minus 7x plus 20x. So I lose 7x's, I gain 20x's. I'm up in total 13x's. All right, and then again, I have my minus 35. There we go. All right, let's see, one more of those before we do something a little bit special. We have D, so I have a 2x minus 3 times 3x plus 4. All right, so once again, using FOIL. And so I'm going to multiply my first one. So I have my 2x and my 3x. That's the first one in this bracket. That's the first one in that bracket. All right, well, 2 times 3 is 6. And if I multiply the variables, I'm going to get an x squared. All right, outside ones. 2x is on the far left, 4 is on the far right. So 2x times 4, 2 times 4 is 8, and I have that x. All right, inside negative 3 times 3x, that's going to be a minus 9x. Negative 3 times 3 is not negative 9, and there's the x there. And then lastly, the last ones, I have a negative 3 times a 4. Again, negative times a positive is always going to give you negative. Signs of the opposite. Minus 12. And of course, putting in like terms together, I have my 6x squared. Don't have any more of those. 8x minus 9x. That is minus an x. Or you can put minus 1x. Doesn't matter. It means the same thing. I lose an x, I lose 1x, doesn't matter. And then lastly, my number there, minus 12. And again, I don't have any more like terms because I have x squareds, x's, and 12s, or numbers. So that's all I can do there. All right, so that's multiplying binomials, two binomials, but there is a special case where there's a little bit of a trick. All right, so a trick in a good way, because it's a shortcut to being multiplying certain binomials. All right, so what we can have is a binomial squared. So this is how you expand, or expanding, a binomial square. Which means I take some binomial, for instance, a plus b, that's a binomial. There's two terms in there, one's a, one's b, and I square it. Now, this is again a shortcut because what you could use is that means we got a plus b times a plus b. So you could use FOIL, but here's the shortcut. The formula is if I wanted to do a binomial squared, I square the first term. Then I take this little 2 and I multiply this term and this term. So I take 2 and I times it by a, and I times it by b. And then lastly, because we always seem to get 3 terms when we take a binomial square after we collect like terms, we square the b, the last term. And so when you have a binomial squared, again, you could do FOIL, but there is a shortcut. So we're going to go through that. So for example, I have x plus 3 squared. All right, so I'm going to, again, use my shortcut. I'm not going to use FOIL, although, again, I could. So it says square the first term. Well, my first term is x, so I have an x squared. Then I go 2 times the first term times the second term. So 2 times x is 2x. Then times 3 gives you 6x. And then lastly, you square the second term. So I take a positive 3 and I square it. 3 times 3, I get a 9. Again, that's the fast way to do it. Do a couple of those. B, I have a x minus 7 squared. All right, so again, following my formula, I square the first term. Well, take x and square it. That's easy. The middle term now, I take 2 times the first term times the second term. Well, 2 times x, again, is 2x. Times a minus 7. Got to watch the sign there. So 2x times a minus 7. Well, 2 times minus 7 is negative 14, and I have the x. And then lastly, I square my last term, which again, you got to watch your sign here, minus 7 squared. Minus 7 times minus 7 is a positive, and it's a positive 49. All right, a couple more of those. Let's step it up a bit here. C, I have a 3x plus 2 squared. All right, so again, I'm following my formula. I'm going to square the 3x, which means I have to square both the number and the x. Expanded power rule. Again, here comes our power rules, right? So if I square 3x, I square the 3, and I square the x. I'll square both parts of the term. All right, now the middle part, I'm going to go 2 times this term times this term. So 2 times 3x is 6x times 2, 12x. And then lastly, I square the last term, which is our positive 2. Well, positive 2 squared is a positive 4. All right, last one. Short lesson to start us out here today. 4x minus 5 squared. All right, so once again, I'm going to follow my formula. All right, so I have to square my first term, which again means you have to square both pieces. So I square the 4 and I square the x. And let's see, so next up, the middle term, I got 2 times this term times this term. Well, 2 times 4x is 8x times a minus 5. So 8x times a minus 5. Well, 8 times a minus 5 is a minus 40, and I have that x there. All right, and then lastly, I have negative 5 squared. Negative 5 times negative 5 gives me a positive 25. So again, that's how we are going to multiply our binomials. If you have 2 different ones, you can just use FOIL. But here's a trick, is if you have a binomial and it's squared, again, you could use FOIL because that just means a plus b times a plus b. But there is a shortcut. As you can see, I can do it all in one line. Now, at 10 o'clock today, we're going to start doing what's called factoring. We're going to go the opposite way. We're going to take something like this and make it look like this. All right, so we're going to reverse FOIL at 10 o'clock today and at 11. We're going to do it both times. One's going to be the easy one and one's going to be the harder one. All right, so